The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. Great to be with you on a Monday. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. A lot to get into with the Tony Knight. I'm meshing them. Tony Knight.
Tony Knight sounds like a comic book character.
Doesn't it?
I love that.
Doesn't it? That's the new defensive coordinator, a guy named Tony Knight. My dear Lord.
That's not true.
It's a blur. Yes, I'm joking.
Somebody at home is going to hear that and be Googling
Who's
Tony
this
Knight.
guy? Who's this guy? Tony White, Mr. Tony, right, is off to Florida State. Forgive that botched open on my part, but Mr. Tony is off to Florida State. Pete Thamel reporting it just a little bit ago, reported earlier this morning that Florida State and Tony White were in discussions. The ink is drying, a 3-year deal to be the new defensive coordinator for Coach Norvell down at Florida State. ... What does this mean for the Big Red? Well, you have signing day on Wednesday. You've got portal season in full swing. Already a couple of names into the portal for Nebraska on the defensive side of the ball. We'll tell you about Tim Verghese, going to be with us here from Inside NebraskaRivals.com. What does Wednesday look like? What's his read on things? And who do you replace Coach White with if you're Matt Rule? Couple of internal candidates, couple of dream candidates, and somewhere in the middle. Dear friend Greg Smith of Rivals also reporting earlier this morning that Terrence Knighton could be joining Coach White at Florida State. So pot roast, death row, all those things are fluid right now, but it is official with Tony White off to Florida State. Reaction, we'll get to your thoughts in the stream. Starting 5 shout-outs can always like and subscribe. Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio Twitter, different platforms, and also hear us across the Hail Varsity Radio Network, 489-1240. We'll get into what we think of this here momentarily. But my initial reaction is not be mad or sad if you're a Nebraska fan that he's gone, but more so thanks for the time you had. That's kind of how I try and live life. Thanks for what you got when it was good. And Nebraska got a guy from Syracuse in Tony White that 42% of the games he coached, he held opponents to 10 points or less. In 2 years, there's 3 scores, right? You had the Indiana game, 56 points. You had Colorado game 2 in year 1, 36 points, when that thing 36 could have been 66. And then you had 45 put up by Michigan. You had a bad game this year against Indiana. You had some problems at times against Illinois. They put up 31 in overtime. You had UCLA and USC that put up upper 20s on you. But for the most part, this guy, Tony White, and his black shirts have been winning and keeping Nebraska football in games. That is until you finally made a move with your offensive coordinator to help play some complimentary football. Special teams has been a tire fire for a lot of the ball games. They've not helped you at all. So it's been one phase of football that has helped Nebraska go 11-13 now in 2 years as you head into a bowl game. You got an absolute stud in Tony White. He delivered for you, and you were excited about that part of Nebraska football. Were they perfect? Not always. Were they top 20? Yeah. Were they the reason Nebraska won ball games? Most likely. Were they the reason Nebraska was in games? Definitely. So it hurts. And Elijah, what I'm interested here, what is the fallout? Is this a Lincoln Riley situation where you've got to pray to guys you've got penciled in to step in for a now depleted defense with 5th and 6th year guys that are moving on. They're out of eligibility.
Or they're into the transfer portal.
Or they're into the portal. But Vincent Jackson, Stephon Thompson, Jamari Butler are the 3 names that are now into the portal. And we'll see where things go with Nebraska. You got to keep Van Poppel. You got to keep Lenhart. You got to keep Keona Davis. You got to keep Sierra Wright. You got to keep Bayer. I mean, you want some semblance of experience coming back and guys that have shown the ability to make some plays. We'll see what happens with this defensive side of the roster. You got to get down to 105. Your 2 internal candidates, John Butler, your secondary coach, and Phil Snow. I think what push came to shove, the question is this: why? Why does Tony White move on to Florida State and not a head coaching job?
Well, because that's the part of this that I think rubs Husker fans the wrong way.
Why are you leaving if it's not for a head job?
There it is. If it's for a head coaching job, I think Husker fans sit back and go, we wish you well, Tony White. You've deserved this based on everything you've done. But now he's going
now
off
you
to
broke up with us and you're dating somebody else.
There it is. That's what the feel is today.
Listen, Florida State was 2-10. They're also a year removed from being in the playoff with a 13-1 record before Georgia dropped the nuke on them in the Orange Bowl. So if I'm Tony White, I'm going to get more money, right? The Florida State defensive coordinator who got whacked was making 1.8. You're going to go down there, and there's going to be just tons of dudes to run your defense. You're familiar with the ACC. It's an easier conference to go win in, to be frank. And you've done it before at Syracuse with your defense. So it's familiarity. It's Florida, okay, from a recruiting standpoint, and talent you're going to have on hand. And maybe Tony White's a guy that doesn't like having people look over his shoulder. And what I mean by that, you have John Butler coming in here in the 12th hour. And how well did they hit things off? Who was Matt Rule I'm asking questions. Who was Matt Rule listening to when it came to game plans? Was he listening to his defensive coordinator? Was he taking input from John Butler, the NFL guy? And there are no bad ideas if they work. But if you're the boss on that side of the football, you want your voice to be loudest, presumably. Your head coach is a defensive-minded guy. That's the side of the ball he's most confident in. So there's probably been some more hands-on work this second year by Matt Rule to his defensive coordinator. So there's that. And then you also have the analyst in Phil Snow that's, checking your work time in and time out. And your defense, and I say this term loosely, but slipped a little bit back from what it was in year one because teams had film on you. Brett Bielema figured out how to stress your defense. Indiana's figured out a way to stress your defense. If you played a quarterback worth half a damn, it was a tougher day for you on defense for Nebraska. But they got after the quarterback. There was a lot of TFLs I liked. It was Nebraska's secondary that had a major step back where I think the completion percentage was 64% against them. So that is Butler's position. Is he the internal candidate that gets the nod? That's why he left the Bills, is because he wants to be a defensive coordinator. So I don't know if you look there. Pipe dream, go get me Jim Leonard. Go get me Ryan Walters. At least let me talk to them because those guys have coordinated pretty high-level defenses in the Big Ten. I don't know that you automatically have to promote from within unless that was promised to get some guys here or to get guys to stay. I don't know.
To me, it's not about promise with going internal. It's about the calendar that you're on over the next 2 weeks with recruiting and with portal. And let's be clear, there's going to be attrition on your roster. There needs to be, but there's also guys you need to keep around.
You can't lose the Florida crew.
I mean, you mentioned the name in Sierra Wright. Like, that's a guy that John Butler's brought in and developed. I'm not saying that this is me calling for John Butler to be the next defensive coordinator. I think it makes a lot of sense, despite the fact that the secondary didn't play up to the way people thought they would this season. I mean, John Butler was put into a very tough spot, having to coach a room 3 weeks after first stepping foot on campus, coming into fall camp. Like, that's a tough spot to be put into as a coach. So I'm not going to fully say, you know what, the secondary didn't play great this year, therefore John Butler can't be a good defensive coordinator for Nebraska. I'm not going to go there. I'm just arguing for why going internal
You've got a
makes sense right now.
timeline.
You have a timeline. You have recruits that you need to, by Wednesday, say, hey, this is going to be your defensive coordinator. Don't flip on us. We've got a guy in place that knows this defense, that knows the guys. Makes sense to go internal for that reason. For a guy that was here this year to understand from being there on a day-to-day basis what transfer portal needs you may need this offseason, it's important to go internal for that reason. I think it makes a lot of sense to go internal on this hire as opposed to going and bringing in somebody that has to learn everything about your roster within a 1-week period and also make relationships with recruits within a 24-hour period, if that. Like, in this time of college football, this era with how dense the schedule is in December, you need to have your guy ready to go. You need to bring him in quickly. That's why Florida State's moving so fast here to bring in Tony White, and that's why they brought in Gus Malzahn. Was that on Saturday? You got to move quick right now, and that's why I think it makes a lot of sense for Nebraska to go internal with the hire.
Well, my wish list, if I'm a Nebraska fan, was to have a season of Dana Holgorsen and Tony White together. Give me an offense that'll put up points. Give me a defense that's ready to pounce, be aggressive, and then get me special teams fixed where, worst case, that phase of the game isn't losing for me or detrimental to me. But you can always count on the defense, and that's the only side of the football these last 2 years of the rural era you've been able to count on. So you're not going to have, and you don't have an announcement yet on Dana, but you do have the announcement on Tony White moving on, Terrence Knighton, Evan Cooper. Do they all kind of reunite down in Tallahassee? That's the question. And if that is the case, do some of the Florida kids take off? So it'll be worth monitoring for sure. Barney, Shavers, McGahee, Tarver, and Amari Sanders. Kansas Huskers says, Herbel was seen at Valentino's and Runza in Lincoln.
Not Hy-Vee? It's always Hy-Vee.
He was actually a monster Red Robin guy.
Was he?
Oh, that's what I was told.
To be clear, for the people listening on the radio, this is not serious. This is not an actual report.
No, this is it was from the stream. Kansas Huskers saying that run it back with Bo. That guy could coach defense, absolutely. Terrence Knighton, though, some names to look at. Elijah, if Terrence Knighton is not part of the future, and if you're Nebraska, you lose your coordinator. You can't lose your beloved defensive line coach anywhere but to the NFL, theoretically. That doesn't look like it's happening. And the guys loved playing for Terrence Knighton. So where does Nebraska turn? And, a couple of names to look at. If Pot Roast does indeed relocate down to Tallahassee, one name to watch, and we got some couple of insiders giving us a heads up on this, is going to be Frank Oakham. And former defensive line standout at Texas, defensive line in Carolina, coached for Rule at Baylor, was with the Raiders in 2022 on that staff, so that's why he was maybe not an initial get, probably a phone call for sure back then by Rule. But with Oakham, I mean, he's had incredible defensive lines. He's at Toledo right now, and his Toledo crew, great at getting after the quarterback, stopping the run. They're top 10. So everywhere Oakham's been, his defensive lines have been as good or better statistically than what Nebraska's had.
But I'd also argue maybe more importantly, you have the Rule connection.
Yeah.
Was under Rule at Baylor, was under Rule at the Panthers. You have the Rule connection. As I talked earlier, you got to move quickly through these things. So Oakham is the name I also have circled. I know a lot of people are in the chat here saying back up the Brinks truck, pay Terrence Knighton. I'm kind of working.
I'm not sure that wasn't tried.
Yeah, I'm working under the assumption right now, based on what we're hearing, that Terrence Knighton
wants a change of scenery.
That Terrence Knighton wants a change of scenery and is already 1 foot, if not both feet, out the door. So that's kind of the assumption we're working on. That's why we're talking defensive line coach as well. Where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's been enough smoke with Terrence Knighton along with the Tony White news tape for me to think there's fire.
You cannot have your roster of the 105 you want get rated on that defensive side of the ball. you're going to lose some. You can't lose a handful of key cogs. Anonymous is in. Captain checks in here on the stream. Our starting 5 shout-outs. Great Red Shark is here. Loose Lips says, what's up? Take a shot every time someone says Jim Leonard. You'll be napping by 4:15. I've only uttered it once. QB1 Ace checks in. Johnny Boy is here. He said Jim Leonard. That's 2 shots now.
Can I say something about Jim Leonard? I love Jim Leonard.
He's one of the NFL.
He's already the secondaries coach for the Broncos, who is playing the secondary there, is playing really, really well. I think he is sooner rather than later going to be an NFL defensive coordinator, not to mention the fact he's currently in a playoff chase in the NFL. That's why
you're wearing your Western Division champ sweatshirt today.
He wouldn't be leaving this week. And I also think it'd be a wrong decision of him to leave before he probably gets some NFL defensive coordinator offers this offseason. So I think that's a pipe dream. Would be a great hire, though.
Yeah, Wisconsin's saying, maybe we should have kept that dude around. Mm-hmm. Mike and Callie is here. KG checks in. I have no doubt that there is way more to White going to Florida State than thinking it's a better job, because it's not. I'll say this. If Norvell somehow gets bought out and you have a great defense next season, maybe Tony White gets promoted there. I don't know. Mike is here. Brian's in. We'll get more comments coming up. Tim Verghese next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. Tim Verghese coming up in just a moment. He'll check in with us on the stream. Can watch Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter, different Facebook and social media postings. Reaction here in the stream. Folks are taking the news okay. That Tony White is off to Florida State. Appreciate his time. But
I think
the reality is you knew this day was going to happen.
Husker fans are waiting to lose their S for depending on who the hire is going to be. They're like, okay, let's see what comes next.
Mm-hmm. Well, and is that hire going to be a Rule guy? Is it going to be a Phil Snow? Is it going to be a Butler promoted from within? Is Jeff Collins floating out there that took the Georgia Tech job that was at North Carolina after he lost the Georgia Tech job? And we'll play who's in the portal and who's signing on Wednesday. Here is Tim Verghese. Come on down with a busy news cycle Monday at Tim Verghese on Twitter, inside NebraskaRivals.com. Tim, what's going on today? How are you?
Hey, anything happened today? We got anything to talk about?
Well, the good news is this is not, show 4 for us about what the hell happened in Iowa City. So at least there's a bit of a change up. It's still not good news if you're a Nebraska fan, but at least it's, not a loss that's going to hang on the wall for a year. Now, this personnel loss isn't great for Nebraska if they can't at least match or exceed what you got from Tony White. And all you got from Tony White was top 20 defense for 2 years. What's your reaction?
Yeah, it's tough. I think at the same time, it's somewhat expected, going into the year, we kind of the idea was another good year, could see Tony White leave. I don't think anyone expected him to leave for, a lateral position, essentially, essentially keeping his defensive coordinator title. Me and Steve talked about it in our show that we just posted. But I mean, while this is somewhat of a lateral move, he does have full control of the defense at Florida State compared to at Nebraska. There's multiple voices. John Butler had to say, Matt Rule had to say, a couple other people had to say. At Florida State, it's an offensive-minded head coach. It's an offensive coordinator that's done this before and is very offensive focused as well. It's his offense it's his defense, and he's going to have his pick of his assistants as well. And as we're seeing with the reports that Terrence Knight and potentially Evan Cooper could be following him as well. I just think he's building out his room the way he wants to see it, and he's going to have full control, which is a bit different than the situation at Nebraska.
It's Tim Verghese with us here discussing the news of the day. And Tim, do you think Nebraska goes internal? We kind of had the recruiting angle in the first segment. That's kind of what I believe, is that with signing day being on Wednesday, with the transfer portal window being so small here in December, that you have to have a guy quickly ready to go. And I don't know, maybe Matt Rule has a guy in the back pocket that he has ready to go that's external, but it makes sense to me for Nebraska to go internal here to get things in order before signing day. Do you have that same feel, or do you think I'm looking at that wrong?
No, I think right now it feels like internal makes the most sense, just again to kind of keep this class together, and there's also the idea that over this next month you have a quote unquote placeholder to kind of get you through bowl practices, get you through the bowl game. Internally, that would be John Butler, and over the course of this month you kind of do evaluate some of the national options, but communicate to the recruits that hey, it's either going to be someone from the outside that's going to match our vision, or it's going to be John Butler, who you guys are already familiar with and would basically be running what we've already been running to this point. And, at the end of the day, it's a lot of Rule influence, and this program from Rule down is very Rule. He has his hands over everything within this program.
Tim, I want to get your take on the portal, and we've seen Vincent Jackson, we've seen Stefan, we've seen Jamari Butler say, look, I'm headed to the portal. What's the ripple effects of Tony White with some key cogs on this defense? How concerned should Nebraska fans be about a Lincoln Riley situation where your best side of the football that has returning guys that you're looking forward to seeing could be gone?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm more so than Tony White. I think it's going to be the Terrence Knighton move that has a bigger implication on Nebraska's roster. Losing Knighton. I mean, it's one of those things that James Williams calls him a father figure. That's like I don't know how great the odds are of keeping James Williams if Terrence Knighton isn't here. Same thing, for other guys in that room, Prince Will and Cam Leonard. And even if they don't necessarily follow them to Florida State, the incentive to stay around in Lincoln isn't really there when the defensive coordinator and the defensive line coach you committed to are no longer around. So those two, I'm keeping an eye on the defensive line room. Mm-hmm. Another room I'd keep an eye on the secondary room. You're already seeing, Larry Tarver had a cryptic tweet this morning. I think some of those young DBs, specifically the ones from Florida, could see the opportunity to go back closer to home and play for Tony White and play in that defense. So, it's going to be an interesting couple of days here. I think the priority for Nebraska as of now is keeping this class together. From what we've been able to gather, all the defensive line commits are at least saying the right things. Tyson Terry, of course, still set to sign. Malcolm Simpson, which is the one that I'm keeping a very close eye on because of his relationship, is saying nothing's changed with his status. Obviously, we'll see how that changes once the Knighton news becomes official and whether Knighton decides to push. Because I would also do keep this in mind. Tony White made an effort to not poach guys from Syracuse when he came to Nebraska. We'll see what happens here.
It's Tim Verghese with us here. And Tim, a name you didn't mention there, Dawson Merritt. You have concerns. I know a lot of people out there, because of the flip, say, oh, well, this is a disaster now. Why would Dawson Merritt come to Nebraska? Is that a fair place to be coming from? What's his status in this whole situation?
I mean, the latest there is he seems pretty locked in, and I think he's good to go, just because I think what Nebraska's done is to counteract that they've just pushed the Kansas City flavor, having Jamar Mosey on staff, having Keith Williams on staff, and just the opportunity to come into Nebraska and play early. That all still exists for Dawson Merritt, and at the end of the day, it was Tony White's defense that caught his attention. But it was the relationships he has from Matt Rule down to Dylan Raiola, down to Jamar Mosey, to Isaiah Mosey, and others on staff that has him committed. And Rob Dvorak, of course. As long as Rob Dvorak's around, I'm not super concerned about the linebacker room.
Talk to me about two names, Van Poppel and Keona Davis. Those are two guys that you've seen really pretty high level of flashes from Van Poppel, and he got a red shirt. Keona Davis is a beast and has got great size and athleticism. Nebraska got him, kind of a 12th hour flip last year on signing day, and the upsides there. Are those two names that you should be concerned about as well in the portal potentially?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, anything's on the table at this point, but with those two, I think those are the two most important defensive linemen you have to keep around. I think of the class of the room, those are the two most important guys. Those are the guys that project to contribute not just next year, but beyond. Like Elijah, it's like you said, I mean, Jamari Butler is a tough loss, but at the end of the day, it's a guy that's been around this program for a long time. And we were kind of expecting, a bigger step from this year and hoping to see another step next year. And at the end of the day, it's like, hey, he's entered the portal. Doesn't necessarily mean he's gone. He did the same thing last year or 2 years ago. So, is there a chance he comes back? We'll see. But yeah, I think the most important is maintaining those guys on the interior, because I think Nebraska's going to have an opportunity to get some guys on the edge, but finding interior defensive line bodies is so difficult.
Tim, in terms of what Nebraska still needs defensively, obviously there's going to be some more things that shake themselves out in the portal from a Nebraska standpoint, but whoever the next defensive coordinator is, where do you see areas where Nebraska is going to need some immediate help, some areas where they might need to go poach a couple guys in the transfer portal to shore some things up for next season?
I think you're going to have to find depth on D-line, especially with Jamari and Vincent Jackson entering the portal and potentially a couple others. I think for sure you're going to have to get some there. I could see some moves at Jack or like the edge rusher position as well, just trying to get a couple of different bodies there. But the big one is the secondary. I'm expecting heavy portal movement in the secondary, not necessarily outgoing transfers, but I do think Nebraska is going to be aggressive in trying to get some veteran experience in the secondary room, improve the athleticism in that room, and find guys that fit what John Butler wants, which are ball hawks, guys that can go after the ball, guys that can hit. Big, lengthy guys. So, we've already seen a couple of names in the portal that Nebraska's already engaged with. We'll see. I think that's the position, defensive side of the ball. You're going to see Nebraska get some movement.
Tim, I want to flip things around here. I know it's a day to talk defense, but I want to go offense. Signing day is coming up on Wednesday. We have some flip watches we're paying attention to this week. Obviously, Cortez Mills is the big name. You also have Michael Terry, who's not on flip watch, but he's got a commitment looming as well. What are you going to be watching for over the next couple of days from a non-coaching standpoint as we count down the hours to signing day?
Yeah, Cortez Mills is the big one. That decision sounds like he's going to make a final decision on Wednesday. I'd expect at this point, I think Nebraska's got some confidence in being able to pull that off. From Dylan Raiola down to Matt Rule to some of the others on the offensive staff. Plus, they made a pretty aggressive NIL push as well. So I think that one's trending towards Nebraska, but we'll see. Again, Oklahoma just made their offensive coordinator hire today. We'll see if they can, make any type of effort to keep him in the class here in these next 48 hours or so. Michael Terry, it's Texas and Nebraska like it's always been. Still think Texas has the edge, but I'll say this, I reported last night that the read right now is that it's going to be Texas, and Texas is going to be a call just because of some external things at Nebraska, the NIL push. Texas has a bigger NIL offer out there, and the fact that he sees the path to contention is clearer at Texas than it is at Nebraska. But Nebraska's continued to weigh, and my feel right now is if it's going to be Nebraska, it's going to be the day of the decision. The kid has one of those on signing day, like, okay, 50-50 call. I'm just going to call it at the table. There's a chance Nebraska ends up being that. Nebraska's made it a tougher decision than he ever imagined. Like, I really think the kid's going to be in his head on Wednesday itself, mulling over where he should go. And that bodes well for Nebraska, just because Texas has every other thing in this recruitment, but Nebraska is pulled on his heartstrings. And if they can get some of these, again, all of this doesn't help. The noise on the defensive side of the ball and the noise about the future of the program doesn't really help. If Nebraska can get some of that settled, I think it's going to be a 50-50 call on Wednesday.
Tim, got about 90 seconds here. I want to go a little overtime with you. If you can give us a couple minutes on the other side, does that work out all right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Tim Verghese with us. Be sure to follow him at Tim Verghese on Twitter and read him with Inside Nebraska, Rivals.com, and great YouTube stuff from Tim and the crew there at Inside Nebraska. You can check out. We implore you to do that. We'll have a couple of thoughts from Tim. On the other side, Tony White, Mr. Tony, is off to Florida State. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you some overtime. Tim Verghese with us, Hail Varsity Radio, inside NebraskaRivals.com at Tim Verghese on Twitter. Signing day, Wednesday. Tim, total numbers in your estimation right now. You've kind of touched on the down to the wire decisions. Where do you see Nebraska ending up with the high school class? And what's a projected ranking right now? How good could it be? Or even worst case scenario for Nebraska, where would they end up nationally?
Yeah, as of right now, I'm expecting, and again, we'll see what the ultimate fallout is from today's developments. But ultimately, I'm expecting the current commits to all stay committed, and I'm expecting anywhere between 1 and 3 additions on signing day. I don't think this class goes above 23, 24-ish. This cycle. I mean, it's going to be probably a top 20, finishes a top 20 class, could push into top 15 territory, but more likely than not a top 20 class per the rankings. And we'll see, every cycle the rule's been here. They've done a nice job of kind of resetting a little bit and seeing who's out there for that second December, that February signing period. And this year, because of how accelerated everything is, the season obviously just ended. And now, less than a week later, we're getting signing day. Because of how quick this turnaround is, we're seeing more and more players kind of decide, especially those that aren't early enrolling, kind of decide to wait till February to make a decision. Does Nebraska get aggressive there? And do they circle back on anyone that waits? Or, even they leave no stone unturned. Are they going to find some guys? So we'll just have to see. And again, I think this decision, Tony White and Terrence Knight leaving could see some portal movement they weren't really expecting. Obviously, they're expecting some more. So there's a chance, and we'll have to see kind of what the numbers look like coming out of the month of December and what that means for the next 2 months and what it means in the portal. But as of right now, for Wednesday, expecting no more than 23 total commits. And at this point, I think top 20 class is a fair place to be.
Tim, whenever you look at the guys that are in the class, maybe more of a discussion for Wednesday, but I do want to quickly get your thoughts before we get out. Who's a guy that we're not talking about enough in this class? Because there's been so many names at the top that we've talked about. Plenty, Dawson Merritt. Michael Terry's there. You have Mosey. You have the potential flip coming. Any names that we're not talking about that you think, man, these guys are solid. They could be making an impact sooner rather than later, and we're not mentioning them enough?
Yeah, a couple. On the D line, I don't think we're talking enough about that class because I think all 3 of those guys have the ability to come in pretty early and work into the rotation. Well, I think a flyer one that I'll mention, Tanner Turch had a nice senior season at DB out there. And he's a guy that I think could also play receiver at Nebraska and has some real good receiver tape. But the stuff he did at safety this past year really caught my attention because it was first year fully kind of committing to that side of the ball. Nebraska sees him on the defensive side of the ball. Just seeing where he fits in because I think there's a higher ceiling there than people realize. So I'm just curious to see what happens when he gets on campus and gets with the program and starts to kind of settle in on either side of the ball. He's one, and then Pierce Mooberry. I'll keep hammering. I'm a big fan of Pierce Mooberry. I think he plays the game the right way, has the versatility, has the multi-sport background, does so many of the little things right, and really came into his own as an in-the-box linebacker this fall. I think he's really starting to use his eyes well, does a good job of enforcing his physicality. He's going to need some time to put on some weight. But Dawson Merritt and Christian Jones get a lot of attention, but don't sleep on Pierce Mooberry because I think he's a very talented player who I think in 2-3 years is going to factor heavily into that linebacker rotation.
Tim, we'll get you out on this. Let's talk Dana Holgorsen and timeline with him because you lose Tony White, you can't get punched, and presumably lose Dana, get him locked up. But say Dana is the guy moving forward, that's great, right? When we look at what Nebraska can become offensively, but also just some of Dana's recruits down in Houston. There's portal opportunity. Any guys from the Cougars that are in the portal that could be making their way northward here? Dana's an attractive play caller to come play for at the high school, out of the high school ranks, but also now in the portal era. Yeah,
I reported earlier today, Parker Jenkins was a running back at at Houston that was recruited by Holgorsen. He had a productive freshman season under Holgorsen, ran for just around 450 yards in limited carries. He kind of fell out of the rotation this year. I wasn't sure if it was because of just like headbutting with the new coaching staff or whatever, but he's gone off to the transfer portal. Has that like home run hitting speed Nebraska currently lacks at running back. Runs 10-7 in the 100 meter. I mean, he's a guy Nebraska could take a flyer on as a potential depth piece in the running back room. Holgorsen, that feels like kind of guy Holgorsen would stand on the table for. And I would keep an eye on a couple other guys from that Holgorsen group that transferred elsewhere. He had a bunch of guys that came in to Houston and then they moved on either while he was there or after he left. But he's still got some good relationships, and guys that played for him specifically still like him. And there's a chance, if any of those guys that have some history with him do enter the portal, they could find their way in Lincoln.
Well, we'll see if and when Dana gets inked. You lose Tony White. We'll see how quick Matt Rule moves to make an announcement publicly, as signing day is less than 48 hours away. Tim Verghese, all the coverage inside Nebraska, Rivals.com. Follow him on Twitter at Tim Verghese. Tim, appreciate the time today with all the news. Take care, bud. We'll talk again soon.
Yes, sir. Of course. Y'all take care.
There he is, Tim Verghese with us. Good to get caught up with him, and he ain't wrong, man. Van Poppel and Keona Davis are the two dudes you got to keep on the roster that are currently on the roster. Now that you want any other departures, but saw on Twitter too that some folks are saying Knighton would be a bigger loss than Tony White, and it is so relationship driven. It's not that guys don't like Rule or listen to Rule, but you're every day there with a guy like Knighton that's made that D-line a thing, or as he named him, death row. And if he heads off down to Florida State with Tony White, Evan Cooper, that's a threat to the Florida contingent that you recruited and you've seen some flashes from up here. So a lot of things in flux right now. And, man, what a whirlwind, what a difference a week makes from beating Wisconsin to feeling good to you lose like you lost against Iowa, the handshake controversy, and now it gets real when it comes to livelihood, moves, and money for folks. Matt checks in. Is it a trash can fire or a dumpster fire still? You know
what this is to me? It's whenever you have
momentary panic.
I was going to say, it's whenever you have a leftover Arby's sandwich and it's all wrapped up and you throw it in the microwave, forgetting they have that layer of foil in there.
Yeah, Junior's done that.
And your microwave starts sparking up like crazy and you have that momentary panic before you shut the microwave off and blow on the little flame that's developed and you're like, everything's okay. That's kind of where I'm at today, where we're in the period where everything's sparking in the microwave. And sometimes you have to open up that microwave door and see how bad it actually is in there before you make your assessment. Maybe you have to buy a new microwave, but chances are probably not.
Well, question in the stream, do you feel worse about the coaching departures or still worse about Friday's game? You'll never be able to burn Friday out of your mind.
Yeah, let's get into that last segment. I like that.
Yeah, let's do it. Justice needs a drink. We'll take a quick time out. Hail Varsity Hour 1 continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. Hail Varsity continues. 489-1240. More reaction to Tony White to Florida State. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and Justice Rhody. What's Mr. Blackshirt say? Uncle Charlie, Coach Charlie McBride, and 10 minutes. Jay Moore also weighs in. Some of your emails we'll get to as well. Can email Chris at hailvarsity.com. So did Friday into Saturday just feel like a blur? How is Elijah Herbel recovering from the weekend road trip?
Doing well. It's a little weird to not have my Broncos on a Sunday.
No, you got Denver and Cleveland tonight.
We had some great games yesterday, so that's always nice. Yeah, Broncos got Cleveland tonight. Doing well. It's weird. last night, sitting at home watching Sunday Night Football, thinking like, man, it's weird that we're not going to be into that usual game rhythm where we got Rule to talk tomorrow and then coordinators. We kind of have
we'll have Rule Wednesday.
Yeah, you kind of settle into that rhythm during a season. It's kind of strange to now be like, well, what are we gonna talk about tomorrow? And then you wake up and you go, plenty, I guess.
Well, a couple of comments here. Extremely negative Mike, and he's changed his name a few times depending on the mood of the Monday or even Saturday. The fact that Satterfield and Foley are still employed should tell you everything you need to know about Rule. We don't know if or what changes lie ahead.
I was also going to add something we've talked about plenty. With signing day being on Wednesday, what is your rationale for announcing that publicly on a Monday, even if it has happened behind the scenes?
No, you wait.
You wait till Thursday.
You wait till Thursday. Loose Lip says they don't have to keep anyone. We are talking defensive side of the ball. 6-6, Chris. It's football. Turnover is inevitable. You're not wrong, Tuna, but they're 6-6 because of the defense. They're 5-7 because of the defense last season. They weren't perfect, but they were asked to play perfectly, quite frankly. And, one of the Snitley boys, part of the Boulder Peace Treaty, good to see them in Iowa City. The wonder is this. Matt Rule's a defensive-minded guy. He's going to say his piece. He's going to give his input. And that's warranted. I mean, that's kind of his forte. That being said, how you need to have, and I'm not saying Tony White wouldn't take coaching from his head coach, but how much meddling's probably too strong of a term. But Tim Verghese touched on it. Like the voices on that side of the football between Butler and Rule, and if you're Tony White and you're like, look, bro, here's the game plan. It'll work. Go score some. He didn't say this, I don't think, but dude, talk to your offense. Been holding everybody to 13 and 17 points. Score some points for us. Right? Let's not fumble a punt. Let's not roll a grounder to the holder. Let's hit a kick.
Well, think about that. Think about you win that football game on Friday night if you have a better long snap on that second field goal. And you knock it home.
As bad as Nayer's drop was, or as bad as a couple of the missed throws were by Raiola, damn, you get one more score at that point of the game. It's over. Mm-hmm. It is over.
It changes how Iowa has to do things.
It is absolutely over. And then even you get Nayer on that over route, that response you catch, he's hitting his head on the goalpost. You're just off to Barney with Harburg, right? Got about a half-second, half-count pressure on him.
But that's been the story of Husker football for what,
you're just
8 years now?
Yeah, you're just right there. Uncle Charlie's up next on Hail Varsity.
This is Christian Peter. I'm sorry, but the stories I have about Charlie are not appropriate for the public.
The right case of the Mondays. It's Mr. Blackshirt, Charlie McBride, on Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you into Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and Justice Rhody. And it's that time. It's a Monday with Charlie, Mr. Blackshirt, Coach Charlie McBride with us. Coach, hope Thanksgiving was great. How we doing?
Good. I'm doing good. It's 80 degrees, and it's, in Arizona, all they do is show you a 7-day, outlook, and it's just all sun on top of the thing.
Well, that's good. There's a little cloud in the sky, or several, because, the ball game, the controversy, and then the news today about Tony White. I want to start there, Coach. Nebraska's defensive coordinator is now Florida State's defensive coordinator, signing a 3-year deal with Florida State. I thought Tony White was fantastic at Nebraska. It's too bad to see him go. What do you think of Nebraska moving forward on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, sometimes you get a guy that runs the same thing, and sometimes you get a guy that has something else. And the thing is everybody in the conference has been working on the 3-5 type of defense, and you go ahead and change it, and then all their work went down the tubes, and it'll work out. I mean, it works out every time on most staffs, and hopefully it'll work out here. It'll take some time, I think. With a thing like this, it hurts a little bit with recruiting because a lot of the kids want to know what they're going to do, where they're going to play, and it does bring some confusion. I think that a lot of guys will hold off on their signing maybe and, wait to see what's happening. That's usually what happens. I've noticed it from afar anyway. And I noticed it when I was coaching that kids like to wait and see what's going on, and but now with a change in rules, who knows?
It's Charlie McBride with us here, Mondays with Charlie on Hail Varsity Radio. And Charlie, whenever you look at this change, it also sounds as if Terrence Knighton is going to be following along with Tony White off to Florida State. I want to get your thoughts on how you thought the defensive line played this season, what kind of loss that is, and how difficult it is to replace a defensive line coach.
Well, that's going to be a thing to see. You want to see. I've always looked at it, and not that I was a defensive and offensive line coach, but I was a line coach all my life. But the idea is, if you don't have somebody that is well versed in technique and things like that, then you usually run into some real problems. What they did was they started taking gaps and started doing things instead of, they were reading the splits, what the two linemen were doing to them, and then that was their reactions rather than stand there and catch. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing you have to learn. I worked on some kids using their hands for 2 years. It doesn't come. Some kids it comes overnight. Some kids it comes up forever. And so you just wait till all that stuff pops, and then you have to wait till you see what kind of peripheral vision they have to be able to pick up the, what's going on around them as far as guards pulling and as far as, where the guy's places his head. And that sounds stupid, but where he places his head makes a big difference in what the play is. And so it's a technique thing. And they got to find somebody that maybe knows some of that stuff, and, it really helps.
Coach, I want to ask you about Tony White and the perception that you take the same job at a 2-10 program at Florida State, leaving Nebraska. It's not like you're leaving for a head job, but you're leaving for a lateral move down at Florida State where, despite Norvell's contract, it doesn't feel all that warm and fuzzy and stable because of how their season went this year. Can internal tension be the driver, a decision maker? And I don't know that for sure. I'm just asking out loud. There's a whole bunch of reasons guys make lateral moves, correct, in the world of coaching?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In fact, I went from defensive coordinator. Of course, I had a different problem. My coach was sick, and I know that he was going to leave. But I went from defensive coordinator and defensive line coach to just the defensive line coach. And then when those a couple of years later, when Coach Van Zandt left, well, then that changed the whole picture, and I became the defensive coordinator because I had been one before, and I think that helped part of the move because there was a couple guys ahead of me as far as time, and that doesn't make a lot of difference. Sometimes it's, can you get the kids to play, and have you got, the head coach can see those things that you don't see. I mean, you're you. That's who you are. I mean, but some guys have a knack for doing that. I think Tony has that knack. I think he can get guys to play, and plus he's a heck of a defensive coach. It may have been that there's some other things that on the back burner, maybe not that the head coach knows, but that the AD knows that if things don't go good, that he's still going to be a part of the show, and it could be the head man. You never know. What takes him down there. Sometimes it's not money. Sometimes it's a promise of something else.
Coach, I want to ask you about the game now and reaction to the Iowa loss. I mean, there's been 100 tough pills to swallow for Nebraska fans. That might have been the biggest pill with how dominant Nebraska was for much of that game, only to lose in the waning moments. Again, we were there for it doing shows. So it was, a quiet place. Then it turned into a ruckus place. And then it turned into, a bit of a nightmare for Nebraska fans because Iowa did it again.
Yeah, well, it's just, it's not snake bit. It's just that's what happened. But the thing is, it's the thing, how it happened. It's the same old thing. It's a fumble, it's an interception, and it's those things that, you don't recover from. And sometimes, you do say, oh, no, it's going like that again. And sometimes that's what it is. And a lot of times you're the winner. You're the guy they pick to win. And like Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State probably practiced like they were going to win and, took their time and did their thing and worked out and just walked out on the field thinking they're going to win, and they should have, and they didn't. And that's what happens. That's what can happen, too. I think, with the little incident that happened at the beginning of the game, it tells you a little bit we got some followers on the team. In other words, I would be willing to bet you that if you took all of those kids and asked them if they wanted to shake hands, they'd probably say, I did. I would. But somebody told me to do it. Well, if you're a man, you just do your thing. You show you've got some guts. And then, and so a lot of that stuff, you get paid back. A lot of that talk, I know you see a lot of guys talking to each other, especially defensive backs that make a play. I think it's the only one they ever made in their whole life. Then the next play they get beat deep. And so, it's a world where you see the good teams you don't see a lot of that stuff. But now it's starting to pop, and now I'd say that the kind of people we have playing the game is changing a little bit. We got a lot of followers and some kids that you got to be themselves instead.
Charlie, the kind of common response I've seen to the handshaking incident on Friday night is, well, it's a bad look. Not many Husker fans like it, but also it's not a huge deal whenever you consider the fact that Nebraska, they lost the game because of self-inflicted wounds, not because they didn't shake hands pregame. I want to get your thoughts on that. Is that a small thing or is that a big deal to you, Nebraska not shaking hands?
That's, sometimes I would be willing to bet you that in some cases they tell them when there's no shaking hands, period. You can get the flip of the coin, you go to your place, and then that's all there is to it. But, even after the game, I think they all got fined $100,000 a school for that little incident after the Ohio State game and Michigan. And that's ridiculous, that stuff. And, I watched it from here on the Big Ten channel, and they had one guy come piling in there, and he's going from Ohio State, and he's just, it made a fool out of himself. And probably to a lot of the players, because a lot of them were talking Michigan guys on the in the perimeter. They were out talking to their friends and the guys that they knew or something. And and there's that one bunch that wants to do this thing and one bunch that wants to do another thing, and it doesn't hurt your whole team chemistry. Coach
McBride, I want to ask you: did it ever get to the point of trading blows between Colorado or Oklahoma pregame or postgame?
No, we actually didn't. I don't remember any. I don't remember. Like a lot of them are meeting in the tunnel and pushing each other and shove. Oh, there's been some shoving around on the sideline, I suppose, from time to time, when a guy goes out of bounds or something like that. But I don't remember any major issues. Now, I don't remember every second in 23 years, but nothing that would be bad enough to stay in my mind.
Right.
And so I didn't see, and I think it goes to your leader where that stuff a lot of times comes from, but in that case, our guys wouldn't do it just because of Tom, the respect they have for him.
Charlie McBride's with us. Coach, we'll wind it down with this. How do you look at this season with Nebraska football? They're 6-6. They're bowl eligible. Was there more on the table for them, or do you think this is a successful season? How do you ballpark it?
I think it's a successful season. I think the coaches and the players that are coming back learned a lot. Mm-hmm. Some of the yeses and nos, and some of the things that they've got to do, and shows that they need to work. And a lot you learn a lot when you're a young player. I had an older guy, a senior. I was a freshman. And I was playing on the varsity in college, and he grabbed me aside and says, keep your mouth shut. And I kept my mouth shut, and he was right. I was talking too much, and sometimes players, coaches, all of us, we all have our things that are not real good with us, but I think a lot of times the more, like my dad said, don't say anything. You got to come back. You have to go back and apologize and do all that. So watch what you're talking about and think before you say it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we don't do that, and especially on the football field.
Well, we'll see what Matt Rule can do with his replacement, Coach McBride. There's John Butler that came in from the pros. There's Phil Snow that's been an analyst. Does he go outside? Does he promote within? And, there's some thoughts out there that maybe Nebraska switches back to a 4-3 moving forward.
Well, let me tell you something. You want to look to see you get a good teacher, mm-hmm. Not just a good guy. I've been in pro ball for long, this and that. I've seen guys who come back from professional football and say, that coach is the worst coach I ever had. He doesn't teach you anything. And so a lot of those times in that pro football, their buddies hired him, mm-hmm. and they kind of hang on, and then they're leaving. That makes me nervous when they say they're leaving to go to recruit and doing all the things they want the pro ball to get away from.
Mm. Yeah, and we'll see. We'll see what Nebraska ends up doing. They got to keep Dana too. You know it.
Yeah, they got everybody's got their own thing, and the way they hire and the way they fire, and so you just don't know what's going to come of it.
Well, we'll talk to you next Monday, signing day, and maybe some official news on who the new coordinator is on both sides of the football. Coach, you stay warm. Enjoy that 80 degrees.
I will, but I think I'm headed back pretty quick. So.
Bring it with you.
Yeah, please.
I won't be smiling. I guess I'll be, kind of wrapped up.
Yeah, you'll be keeping warm.
Well, I'm trying to fire up that smoker on Saturday, so bring that weather back.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck with that. Coach, you take care. Thank you much.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'll talk to you later. Bye now.
There he is, Mr. Blackshirt, Charlie McBride. Good insight there. Get a teacher, a good teacher, and we'll see where Nebraska goes moving forward. Jay Moore's got a thought. The Blackshirt Hour continues. Monday edition, Tony White to Florida State. Hail Varsity continues. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. Log on, Hail Varsity YouTube channel.
All-State, 2-year starter, and rush in for the Big Red, an NFL vet.
Who's Dudeness or Duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
It's Blackshirt Jay Moore with Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it, Blackshirt Hour continues. Busy news day. Jay Moore with us, Blackshirt Husker NFLer, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Justice Rhody. Tony White is off to Florida State, reported by Pete Thamo a little bit earlier. 3-year deal with Florida State. Let's start there, Jay Bird. We knew it, not if, but when Tony White would be moving on. But this is a lateral move from a title standpoint down to Florida State as their defensive coordinator. What do you think?
Yeah, obviously this popped up, earlier this morning, and things have moved rather quickly. You thought there was a good chance that Tony White would be leaving the Nebraska program, but not for another defensive coordinator position, to be for a head coaching position. Obviously not a ton of good jobs opening up this year, and I think teams are a little more leery of absolutely, firing guys with buyouts and just how with transfer portals and all that kind of that mess that is college football now. But him going to Florida State with joining Mike Norvell, that's a bit of surprise. Obviously some money involved, but I'm scratching my head a little bit. You're joining a team that won 2 football games. Obviously they were a damn good football team last year, to not make the playoff because their starting quarterback got hurt, and they get destroyed by Georgia in the Orange Bowl. So obviously something else is potentially going on a little bit inside the new football complexes down there. But yeah, it stinks to see him go to a lateral move. Love what Tony White's about. Love what he's able to do from a defensive standpoint and how this 3-3-5. But it's just is what it is. Nebraska's got to kind of figure it out. I'm sure he's going to move on. Won't be coaching the bowl game. Will join Florida State right away to help recruit. I understand. Look, Florida State's not a bad job by any means. Anytime you get a major job in the state of Florida, recruiting is much easier. But I appreciate what Tony White was able to do here in a short period of time, and wish him the best of luck down there. And I mean, whoever steps up next has some big shoes to fill. Whether it's outside source coming in, another defensive coordinator, whoever it may be, or you're hiring from within, definitely some big shoes to fill. And kind of got to figure out which way you want to go with the defense schematically. You want to stick with a 3-3-5, or you want to go to a 3-4 or 4-3, whatever it is. But those are going to be some tough shoes to fill for sure.
It's Jay Moore with us here, Hail Varsity Radio, as we talk Nebraska's coaching staff changes. Tony White off to Florida State. And Jay, whenever you evaluate what the 3-3-5 was at Nebraska, we don't know what the next coordinator will be bringing in, whether it's 3-3-5, 4-3, 3-4, whatever it may be. But when you look at the 3-3-5, there were a lot of concerns about it coming in. Do you think those concerns had merit whenever you look at some games this year, such as Illinois, obviously Indiana, you have UCLA. Teams were able to move the ball with more success this year once they had a year of film on the 3-3-5. It wasn't what it was last year. What's just your take on the 3-3-5 as a whole? Success, failure? Would you like to see more of it at Nebraska?
I don't know. I just want to see good, solid defensive football. I don't care which way you do it. I don't care schematically. Listen, I've played in a 4-3. I've played in an over-front 4-3. I've played in an under-front 4-3. We don't have enough time today to kind of dissect. I've played in 3-4 defenses, and there's different 3-4 defenses. You have the kind of the Bill Belichick, Bill Parcells 3-4 defense, and you have a different 3-4 defense that was kind of the Wade Phillips style. So again, that's another hour or two conversation of how different those are. The 3-3-5 was unique. Didn't know much about it. What I did know was teams with lesser talent ran it because you could cause chaos. You could do a lot of movement, different looks, different fronts. I liked what we got out of it. I thought with the guys we had, they fit well. Obviously having Ty and Nash and Jamari Butler and some younger players, Riley Van Poppel, and Elijah Judy, some guys in there that fit in that scheme really well. Linebacker-wise, with Reimers and Hendricks last year, they stepped into those roles. You had your outside guys with MJ Sherman, Princewell, Cam Lenhart. Some guys were able to kind of plug and play, and they produced. Secondary-wise, obviously not as good as last year. Some guys that I thought would step up and have play better just didn't this year. So I think that was a little bit of the issue. You better have a good secondary if you're gonna put 5 guys back there, right? You better have some dudes that can play some ball. You got to have some communication. Listen, I think you can run whatever defense you have. You just have to have the dudes. You have to have talent. Nebraska's arguably the most of their talent on this team lied in the defensive, and especially the defensive line and the front seven. But you got to recruit, and if you got guys that are going to be Sunday guys, it don't matter what scheme you're running, it's going to work. It just is. I've seen it from every aspect. You can make changes and you can do things, and you can make drastic changes defensively too. I mean, we went from an overfront to an underfront my sophomore year to my junior year, and we ended up being one of the best defenses in the country going into my junior year. You just got to identify talent and get the talent, and then put those guys in the best position to win, and let them go do their thing. So whoever comes in next, I truly don't care. I see positives from all 4-3-3-4, 3-3-5, whatever it is. You got to have guys. You got to recruit. You got to have speed. You have to have athleticism. You got to have erasers. You have guys out there, and that speed erases everything. Speed erases mistakes. You got to have athletes that can run and make plays. And I think we're seeing some of that evolution of Nebraska recruiting to get those guys here. They just need more. Nebraska needs more talent to be more successful.
Jay Moore's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. So 2 names to watch. Phil Snow, does he come out of retirement? John Butler has been a coordinator before and wants to be a coordinator again, brought on staff, presumably for this moment. Who goes with Tony White, not just from a defensive staff standpoint, and I'm talking about Terrence Knighton, but from a player standpoint, we know Jamari Butler is in the portal. Who else departs? And right now you had some names to really want to hold on to. I mean, if you're Nebraska, you don't want a guy like Keona Davis heading out. You don't want Van Poppel taking off. What's the allegiance like, Jay? Is it your position coach on the D-line, or is it your head coach on that side of the football, Tony White, if you're a player that has free movement right now?
Yeah, I think, we saw Stephon Thompson, I think, went in the portal as well. I could see him potentially going on there. He was a Tony White guy at Syracuse, so another spot for him potentially. But, I mean, Florida State has some dudes, man. I mean, that team has underperformed. I think they have a lot of Sunday guys on that defense already. But, some of these younger players, again, I don't know exactly how the transfer portal works. Obviously, if their head coach leaves, you have a free reign. If you graduate, you can leave. Some of these younger guys, to my understanding, I think if they would leave now, they'd have to sit out. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it's any different.
You've got 1 year of free movement.
You got one. So okay. So
you got a freebie.
Yeah. So obviously there is some, but
you don't want a Lincoln Riley situation, is what I'm saying defensively. If you're Nebraska, because you're going to have to replace the ties and the polar bears as is. I mean the Bullocks of the world. Your secondary. I mean, Sierra Wright has more eligibility for you. You don't want it to. The dream is to actually have complementary football, where your defense is giving up about 13 a game, your offense is scoring 30 a game, and there's no more Iowa situations because you're barely able to pee a drop and put up 10 points because you can't catch footballs.
Yeah, right. It's funny. I mean, how drastically things have changed, just from handshake gate to the Iowa performance.
We're going to get your take on the handshake.
We'll get into that eventually, I'm sure. But yeah, with these changes, and this week's gonna be nuts. You have early signing period, transfer portal stuff, coaching changes. This is gonna be. You guys will be the fastest moving week ever for you guys today. There'll be something exciting to talk about. And obviously, the bowl game announcement's coming out on Sunday. So, listen, you're gonna have some shakeups. I mean, you're gonna just with the roster limits too. And I don't know when exactly those are all coming to fruition. Whether it's before spring ball, after spring ball, before you're gonna have there's gonna be chaos. There's gonna be guys leaving, coming, going, whatever it is. But I think Tony White was a much respected coordinator. Guys love to play for him. There's probably gonna be a few more guys that follow, and that is what it is. I'm not gonna lose sleep over some players from leaving. They can do their thing, and I think if they have, and we've seen this with Rule in the past, if players are even thinking about it, he tells them to go. He wants people to be 100% in. We have this discussion all the time. Are you committed to a coach? Are you committed to a school? I was committed to a school. Some kids commit to play for a coach. I get it both ways. So if you committed to play here because of Tony White and he leaves and you want to follow him, you're going to go follow him. And best of luck to those players that do that. But if you have kids here that want to play for Nebraska and play for Coach Rule and see, the progress that has been made and play for this fan base and this opportunity that you have, hey man, let's rock and roll and let's get the job done. But yeah, this is going to be this next couple of weeks are going to be crazy.
It's Jay Moore with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Jay, to hit on what you were just talking about a second ago with the transfer portal guys leaving, I do think it's slightly ironic that you have 2 days ago after the Iowa loss, Husker fans saying, well, the Scott Frost leftovers don't know how to win tight ball games. There's too much scar tissue there. They can't get it done. We need to see what the younger Rule guys have. And then you get to Monday, and there's former Scott Frost leftovers and guys who haven't been getting the job done entering the transfer portal, and Husker fans are freaking out. There seems to be a bit of dissonance there between what you're saying Friday night and Saturday morning and now what the reaction is on a Monday whenever what you were asking for is happening.
Yeah, that's social media in a nutshell. Right. One day it's constant overreaction. That's all it is. That's what we live in now. It's what people like to do. They have 2 feet and different mindsets all the time. So yeah, you're gonna get people's reaction. They're gonna say one thing, and all of a sudden, which way the wind blows, they'll get it blown to another side of the aisle or whatever story they see, and they constantly change minds. That's just social media, college football, and the aspect we live in. Listen, I want the kids who are going to be here. If you don't want to be here, go. And then if those certain kids leave, you go recruit other ones and get better players in here to replace them. It's pretty black and white. So I don't get those decisions that get made by, 18, 19, 20, 20-year-old kids. Me and recruiting and this whole thing, it is what it is. I just want the kids who want to be here, get better, want to get better, be a little pissed off about how you lost to Iowa, to make sure that never happens again. Go get help. Go get kids who want to be here and want to get better and want to get developed, and go get difference makers that can get this thing back to where it needs to be. So there's those people who, the fan base who wants to say, hey, they're upset over certain things, or listen, it's just college football is crazy. It's going to be chaotic. My advice to them: try to take your emotions out of it as much as possible, because it's going to be craziness, the next month.
Jay, going to switch up to Iowa at Nebraska, 13-10. Iowa does it again. Improbable, and it still happened. Your reaction to that, and I want to get your also take on the handshake controversy with the way Nebraska's been portrayed. You've got folks that are appalled lack of sportsmanship. You've got folks that totally get it. You know, screw Iowa. They wouldn't let him pray. So where are you at?
Yeah, I see both sides. You know, I'm always reminded of a comment that, if you're going to play stupid games, be prepared to win stupid prizes. So if you want to make those decisions, you just got to be prepared to take what's going to be, what could potentially come out of it. They look kind of foolish right now. Mm-hmm. So you want to put yourself in that, even if they didn't allow you to do your thing. I'm kind of on the side of the tracks where don't give the teams extra motivation. Be bigger than them. Don't stoop to their level. Iowa's been obviously super petty in how they've done things in the past. And, I've been captains of games. You shake their hands and then you go kick their ass and shake them one more time. You get out of Dodge. So that's that. They made a business decision. It failed. You did dominate most of the game except for 3 plays, and you lost. Super frustrating. Still, this one hurt. This one was a tough pill to swallow. I think I woke up numerous times, Friday night, early Saturday morning, and was just like, how in the hell do you lose that football game? And that's what Nebraska's got to figure out is in these games. Iowa knows how to win close football games. Nebraska knows how to lose them. They figure out ways to lose them. Iowa figures out ways to win them. Iowa does their thing. And the sad thing is you talk to 90% of the fan base, when it was getting down to, after that first field goal was missed, the second field goal was missed by Nebraska, people were like, here we go. This is what Iowa does. They get you and they kind of lull you to sleep a little bit and they let you make mistakes. And they capitalized, and that's what they did. And just the thing is the things that hurt Nebraska, plagued Nebraska this year, showed up on 4 plays. Poor special teams plays twice, poor tackling once, and some missed opportunities in the offensive game. The narrow drop was huge. He's got to catch that football. Do your job. Catch the ball. Long snapper, do your job. Snap the ball. Guy catching punts, do your job. If you're not going to catch it, you better communicate to the 10 other your teammates a poison or a Peter call as long as you can to let your teammates know this ball has not been touched and get away from it. Or go and catch the ball. So it's simple. It's really, really simple, and it's fundamental stuff. It seems so simple, but Nebraska finds ways to not execute and do those certain things. But you got to learn to do those things when it matters, and they do it at times. But it just seems that when it does matter the most, they don't execute well. So obviously, rather disheartening, very disheartening. It's very, very disheartening. But it's just one of those games where Iowa knows who they are. They're comfortable doing it. Nebraska outplays them for, like I said, I don't know how many snaps were total in that game. But, and again, you want to go back to the Bo Pelini saying it's not about yards, it's about points. And Iowa scored more points. You can look at the stat sheet. Other than the turnover category, I mean, Nebraska dominated, but you can say that many different times. And Iowa is the one smiling, and we're over here scratching our head and thinking, how in the hell that happened? But it's just you don't execute, and when it matters, and in special teams it matters. In close games, special teams matters. And I've said it on this show for many, many years. In Big Ten football, you better have damn good special teams play, because you're going to have close football games, and that's the difference maker 95% of the time is special teams.
Jay, about
Nebraska's not good enough there.
Jay, real quick, success or to be determined? How do you view 2024 real quick?
I think I can see positive things. I do. They've gotten one more win. You're playing in a bowl game, so I don't know how you don't say that's not success. I think the way the game ended on Friday night obviously puts a sour taste in people's mouth, and people want to think otherwise. But it's a year you beat Colorado, you beat Wisconsin. If you could have beat Iowa, obviously vastly different outlook. They still got a lot to play for. I think with the news of today and this afternoon, I think that dampens some things as well. But you get 13, 14 practices here to develop, work on some things, figure out who you want to be, develop some young players, give them an opportunity to go play, and try to go win a bowl game, whether it's in Charlotte or Nashville or Phoenix or New York, wherever they're going to be. It's an opportunity for these young players to go out and play and get rewarded for winning 6 games and try to get better. So it's a success. I'll say that it's a success. It's just the way it ended and how today's kind of unfolded. I know it doesn't seem that way, but I gotta chalk it up to seeing some progress.
Jay Moore with us. Big Red Wrap-Up, Blackshirt Husker NFL, or at JMoore44. Bird will holler next week. Talk bowl destination. Thanks for a few minutes.
You got it, boys.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Love the suggestions in the stream. Rick checking in, Ken in, Captain, Game Dog, all of you have a take on coordinator. Ed is in, as well as Coach Brandon, Dave. And if we were to take by names typed, there's the Jim Leonard, leader in the clubhouse.
Pipe dream, I think.
Yeah. Walters is there. There's been lukewarm, is putting it nicely, for Butler.
Similar, I'm not sure if I've seen it in the show today. I've seen it out there, though. Jeff Collins.
Yeah. For the old Georgia Tech coach that said, hey, why don't you take Jeff Sims?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. He spent a year at North Carolina, obviously, with Mac Brown out. Probably leaves him looking for a job, but he previously worked under Rule, so that's another name that I've seen floating out there with lukewarm reaction. Sorry, I sent it over to you as you were midway taking a drink of water. I do
vodka's gone. So, show's done. We'll be back tomorrow. Matt Schick will be with us. We'll check in with Brunsey, Michael Bruns, Husker 24/7 Sports, and Mitch Sherman will join us. We'll see if there's any more news. Here's my question, and Vincent Shavers is a young, promising player. And is he portal bound? Well, it's interesting to look at his social media.
Yeah, I've seen it. I guess I can't explicitly remember what his social media looked like before before this news broke today. But as of now, it's a lot of back to stuff from his high school pictures and whatnot, as well as his Twitter bio does not say anything about the University of Nebraska. So that is an interesting one to follow. But again, I don't know what that looked like before today. The 4 freshman names that you look at as being important to keep around, and why we mentioned this: Shavers, McGahee, Raiola, and Barney are, I think, the 4 must keeps of the guys that were true freshmen this past season.
Keona Davis, Van Poppel, or we'll put our top 10 together for tomorrow. As more portal news. But how many guys are jumping to the portal as just a threat rather than a promise to get 1890 to pony up? I mean, it's the leverage game, right? And I think, go back and listen to the Tim Verghese segment just with the voices in that defensive room. Coach, former coordinator / NFL guy in Butler, your head coach, and then there's Mr. Tony. And how much autonomy did Tony White have in Lincoln year 2? And that can force a guy to start looking around. That is got to be some part of this equation when you look at making a lateral move. And if you know that your defense has got to allow 14 or less to win the game, how pleasant are the conversations if your defense, dear God, gives up 17 or 20 points? All in the name of, well, I'm going to have to do something about Satterfield here because my defense can't keep pitching shutouts. That's what it looks like. We don't know what it sounds like internally. But if that is a conversation, or you're getting hell or catching hell after 56-7 at Indiana, you're going to start looking for anything. So Tony White was money. Best to him down in Tallahassee. We'll be back tomorrow at 4.
But not
Hail Varsity.
But not before we all enjoy Bo Nix in prime time.
Yeah, you have fun.